Could you imagine someone just occupying your home without permission and being unable to remove them? Is this actually a serious problem or political hyperbole? Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Bill Number. I'm your host, Sarah, and with me today is our favorite Brit, Stephen. How are you today?
Oh, tickety boo. We don't actually talk like that over here, though, Sarah.
Well, how are things on that side of the pond?
Well, what isn't happening over here? Very, very exciting at the moment. As befits the year of democracy, as people are calling this year, elections happening
Ooh,
all over the world. Just had a
yeah.
really big one in India, a really big one in the EU. Worries about the far right and so on. But here in Britain. Our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, inexplicably called a snap election a few weeks ago. We're about 3 weeks into the election campaign now. The election is going to be on the 4th of July. So obviously lots of Independence Day sort of references and memes happening. But it was inexplicable. The government is hugely unpopular at the moment. The opposition is like 20, 25 points ahead.
Wow.
And so no one can really understand why he called an election. But things have only got worse since he actually called the election. He's made some terrible mistakes. He So he launched the campaign in the pouring rain, so he looked like a drowned rat, which was really bizarre. Then recently he decided to leave the D-Day celebrations in France to go home and do a political interview, leaving the previous prime minister for all the photo ops with President Biden and all these other dignitaries, which was received extremely poorly. So
I'm
yeah,
sure.
it's looking like we could have a new government in a few weeks.
It is so crazy to me that you all can call an election that will happen in 6 weeks, and it took
No,
six
crazy.
weeks for India's election to take place. Like, talk
Yeah,
about different democracies from around the
it
world.
is
Like, that is
nuts, isn't
just,
it?
that's crazy. Yeah,
Yeah. And 6 weeks is a long time for us. People are calling this a really, really long election. And people are worried that everyone will get fatigued. After about three
yeah.
weeks, we're done. We don't want
Oh my
anymore.
gosh.
Cram it all into a short period of time, and then you choose your new leader. And of course, our new leader takes over straight away. So the
Yeah.
election's on the 4th of July. We
Hmm.
will know the results by the early hours of the 5th of July. And then in the morning, that morning on the 5th of July, the new prime minister moves into number 10. The old prime minister moves out. They have a carefully coordinated, moving vans leave, new person arrives, makes a speech outside number 10, and then he gets stuck in the very next day.
Is that cat still there in number 10?
Oh yes, the cat's still there. He's doing well. He's seen many, many a prime minister come and go. So I'm sure he will be featuring very highly when in the transition.
I love that cat. It's much better than our killer dogs in the White House right
Yes, yes,
now.
that's right. I don't think the cat's bitten anyone yet.
Yeah,
Though
no,
who
no,
knows?
no.
Cats, you know.
Yes. I mean, cats can be biters for sure, but they're usually a little nip than like a bite.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, talking about moving in and out of houses, let's
Yes,
get
excellent segue there,
started.
Sarah. I love it.
In March of 2024, Liano Moreno, a Venezuelan citizen in the US, published a TikTok suggesting that immigrants should occupy abandoned homes, claiming that squatters' rights and for people to essentially just move into these places that are uninhabited. These videos went viral and sparked a lot of interest and, surprise, surprise, controversy. And the first thing I really want to start with is what exactly is squatting?
Well, squatting goes back a long time, and it has many different definitions. Pretty much everybody, when they think about squatting, will think about something different. So it can be back in the day, you'd get sort of travelers occupying pieces of land and so on, and they would claim that they have the right to live there. In particular, during the 60s, you had like hippies occupying unoccupied premises and so on. But basically, squatting is defined as when somebody enters and occupies a property without the legal right to do so. So it's often equated with trespassing because trespassing will
Mm,
often occur at the same time. But squatting also involves a claim of occupancy or ownership of some kind, either a strong one or a much weaker one. And
okay.
contrary to popular belief, there are no particular squatters' rights in the US. That is absolutely not a thing. There is something that's related and is often confused, which is called the doctrine of adverse possession. And this allows someone to claim ownership after a long term open occupation of a property, but it's very rare and difficult to enforce. It's basically only arises where there is a genuine conflict over who owns the property or something, and someone's been
Mm,
living there for like 10 years. They've lived their life there, they've got the keys, they've got all the bills in their name, all that kind of stuff. And then
mm.
you have a sort of lengthy legal battle to decide who actually owns it.
Okay, so it seems like squatters might have slight legal protections, but the practice itself is illegal. And it can cause a lot of headaches. Recently, there was a really high-profile case in New York that highlighted some of these issues. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Certainly. So in April, homeowner Adele Andaloro found her property occupied while trying to sell it. The police said, she called the police. They turned up. The police said that they couldn't remove the occupiers who claimed to have a lease, but crucially couldn't produce it. She also
Hmm.
called the local news, who are running a particular campaign against squatting, and so the cameras turned up as well. So there's videos of all this online, and she then changed the locks. And there's another video of the police actually arresting her for changing the locks, because it turns out you're not allowed to change the locks of a property where it's occupied without those occupiers' permission, even if you think that
Hmm.
those occupiers don't have the rights to actually live there. So it's a strange, sort of quirky law. And as well as facing obviously her own criminal charges, she also faces a lengthy court process to actually evict these people from the property, even though she claims that they're there illegally. Now, of course, we don't know whether that's true or not. She certainly sounded quite convincing. She certainly was very upset.
Hmm.
But that's the case, that she couldn't actually just ask the police to remove these people or kick them out herself or change the locks. And that's not because the people living there had squatters' rights. It's basically because the Constitution gives them the right of due process. So if you claim that they're breaking the
Mm,
law, they have a right to their day in court. And as we know, these
mm,
legal processes can take a really, really long time and cost a lot of money. So there are certain circumstances where constitutional rights, which are obviously very good rights and very right and proper,
mhm.
can actually have an adverse effect on innocent people.
That is an interesting and sounds very frustrating experience. And I mean, I feel like I've been hearing about squatting everywhere. And, we're kind of in a little bit of a fear-mongering media time in general. But there's also been new legislation introduced to address what people are reporting that they're experiencing.
Yes, yes, that's right. So this wasn't the only case. There were several more in New York itself, and various other cases have been reported from around the country where people tried to dig into this. So in response to that, a number of states have introduced legislation. So three notable enacted bills are from Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. So starting with Florida's property rights bill, which is called HB 621, it was signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis in March. It enhances property protections for property owners, allowing for immediately removal of unauthorized occupants and criminalizing significant damage and fraudulent documentation.
What about the Georgia bill?
Well, Georgia's Squatters Reform Act, HB 1017, which was signed by Governor Brian Kemp in April, defines unlawful squatting, which is what a lot of this legislation does. It seeks to sort of clarify the law and say exactly what do we mean by squatting. And it sets a process for a swifter removal. So squatters must present proof of authorization within 3 business days or face arrest and misdemeanor charges. So it puts the onus on the actual squatter themselves to prove that they're there legally, rather than the homeowner to actually take legal actions to have them removed.
Okay, I see that. What about Alabama's new bill? How does that compare?
Well, Alabama's HB 182, which was signed by Governor Kay Ivey in May, adds conditions that are explicitly related to squatting into the definitions of burglary and perjury. So
Okay.
again, it's focusing on that bit that if you break into a house, then even if you don't steal anything, if you're squatting, then that could actually come under the definition of burglary. And if you lie about having actual permission to be there, then that could be perjury. So you're basically raising the stakes for anyone who feels like doing this. It also allows property owners to request removal of squatters via a sworn affidavit. So if they lie,
Mm.
if they say this person, maybe it's a tenant, who they want to kick out. So they say, "Oh no, they're not a tenant; they're squatters." They have to swear to an affidavit, and if it then turns out that they're lying, then there are obviously
Mm.
legal repercussions for providing such false information. And it also provides a clear process for law enforcement to act. Which again is what a lot of this legislation focuses on. The police will turn up, as they did in the New York case, and say, "It's not really, we don't really have any legal basis to actually take action against these people." So they're aiming to actually change the laws so that the police actually know what they're supposed to do and are able to do it.
And New York has made changes to their laws because of all of this hub, right?
Yes, 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 that's true. So there's obviously a lot of pressure on Governor Kathy Hochul. And so in April, she signed S 8306, which is a big bill, but one little bit of it amended property law to clarify that squatters are not tenants and can be prosecuted. So it allows legal action to actually be taken against actually taken against squatters. So again, it's trying to act as a deterrent. If you feel like just breaking in someone's house and living there, well, know that you may well be prosecuted, and you could face quite stiff penalties for that. And it also aims to streamline that eviction process.
Mm. So, I mean, how prevalent is squatting really, you know? Like, are
Mm.
these laws super necessary, or is this just, a few very unfortunate cases making a lot of noise?
Well, that's a very, very interesting question and quite an important one here because you tend not to make new laws unless there's a serious problem to be addressed.
Hmm.
And the data on squatting is actually very, very limited. But what data there is suggests that it's relatively rare. So in the blog that I wrote about this, and you can see it on the Bill Track 50 website in our blog section. I quoted expert Eric Dunn from the National Housing Law Project, who says that they spend all day, every day dealing with housing issues, and they very, very rarely encounter squatting cases. But on the other side, you had a survey which is cited in a lot of articles about this, carried out by the National Rental Home Council. So they represent small renters, usually people who own maybe just two or three properties, possibly, not like big organizations. And they surveyed their members, and they found quite a staggering amount of their members actually reporting incidents with squatting, particularly in big cities like Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, to point out the obvious thing that we talked about earlier, it seems like with renters specifically, some people might be using these types of laws to misuse them, to kick people out that they just don't want there anymore, or, are annoying or whatever. There has to be some kind of concern around that too, right?
Yes, absolutely, and that is the worry here. And it's like the old saying: if you legislate in haste, repent at your leisure, because these laws have been drafted and passed quite quickly,
Mm.
and there may well be unintended consequences here. And experts, in particular, housing experts, worry that the laws could be used to bypass the proper eviction process for legal tenants,
Hmm.
allowing sort of homeowners to kick people out who they don't want to be tenants anymore, so they can raise the rent and all these kind of things. There's a lot of pressure on the housing market at the moment, and this could exacerbate the housing insecurity that a lot of people are feeling at a time when homelessness is rising, housing costs are still rising. So there are concerns.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of those issues are very prevalent right now in our political climate and our never-ending election season here in the United States.
Mm.
And I feel like this might also be getting politicized as well. Is that kind of the case?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. Particularly with the TikTok videos that were urging illegal immigrants to actually occupy properties. I mean, this is manna
Mm.
from heaven for the Republicans in particular, and particularly during this election year. So Republican politicians in particular are tying squatting to these broader issues around illegal immigration. So Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody, for example, linked it to President Biden's immigration policies, and other people, particularly the Democrats, feel that this is a deliberate tactic which is used to inflame public sentiment
Mm.
against immigrants. This whole all immigrants are criminals, all immigrants are terrible people type tactic, and to justify imposing more stringent laws that will then be used to persecute perfectly innocent tenants.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it seems like despite the prevalence of actually how much squatting is going on and the, attention of it on the media, TikTok, all of that, It seems like there is bipartisan support for this because, as you mentioned earlier, like that you can't change locks on your house when people have broken in there. That's
Mm.
pretty crazy.
It is, and I mean, when you dig into this as I did, and actually look at some of the arguments and look at some of the facts and figures around it, you do see that it's not as clear cut as oh, the right is weaponizing this policy and so on. There is
Mm-hmm.
actually some right to clarifying these laws, and so people don't have to suffer that sort of terrible thing where you turn up to a property you're trying to sell or a property you own and find people living in it, and there's nothing you can do. So there is a need for legislation, and Democrats agree to that as well. So there is a sort of a bipartisan sort of element to this as well, with even beyond this sort of weaponization of the issue by Republicans in particular to focus it on immigration. So the high profile cases, the media coverage, and so on have prompted calls for action across the political spectrum.
And this is certainly a very complex issue with very significant implications. Thanks for breaking it down for us.
Of course, Sarah. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. And don't forget, you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, as well as on TikTok and YouTube.